Welcome to our press conference on Bill 165. Thank you for joining us to hear about our concerns and our call to the Auditor General to review this bill. In a moment, I'll call on our four speakers who will address the very serious concerns we have and show how we could be taking a very different path for our energy future, one that is compatible with sustainable future and respects Ontarians' pocketbooks. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on traditional Indigenous lands, the lands of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas of the Credit, and we are party to Treaty 13 and the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. Indigenous values call us to respect the earth, to think ahead 7 generations when making the decisions we take today, to protect and defend life, the earth, air, and water that sustains us all. It is on us all to learn from these values and to walk a path of justice and reconciliation with the First Peoples of this land. I'll be moderating today. My name is Lynn Adamson, and I'm co-chair of the Ontario Climate Emergency Campaign. OCEC is an organization of 280 diverse member groups representing more than 850,000 Ontarians. We have developed a 12-point climate action plan for Ontario. It's on our website. Check us out. We apply a climate lens to the actions of the government and work with all the parties in a nonpartisan way to work for a sustainable future for all. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers. We'll hear first from David Robertson, representing Seniors for Climate Action Now. Then Gabby Kalapos of the Clean Air Partnership will speak. Then we'll hear from Tim Grant of Harvard Village Resident Association. And finally, from Lana Goldberg of Stand.Earth. After some closing remarks, we'll take questions. So I would like to hand it over right now to David Robertson. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is David Robertson. I'm with Seniors for Climate Action Now. Last week, the federal government released the latest annual report on Canada's greenhouse gas emissions. Ontario has a dubious distinction. It is the province with the highest year-over-year increase in carbon pollution. Ontario's greenhouse gases surged by 5.9 million tons between 2021 and 2022. That is a huge one-year increase. It is the largest increase in 14 years. It is equivalent to adding 1.4 million cars onto our roads. In fact, Ontario was responsible for 60% of all the carbon emission increases in the country. Bill 165 will make that bad situation worse. Buildings are the second largest source of emissions in Ontario. Giving preferential treatment to Enbridge gas and providing an incentive to house builders to install methane-fired heating systems will increase our emissions even more. We're less than 6 years away from 2030. Bill 165 jeopardizes Ontario's already very, very slim chances of meeting the government's 2030 climate targets. That's the first point I want to make. The second is about the cozy relationship between the government and a huge fossil fuel company, Enbridge. It's a relationship that gets demonstrated over and over again. Ontario turning a blind eye to Enbridge's misleading consumer marketing statements. Ontario insisting that Enbridge administer the now defunct federal government's Green Home program. Ontario providing a sole source contract to Enbridge to deliver its Clean Home Heating Initiative. Ontario requiring gas customers to fund Enbridge's expansion through the province's gas expansion program at a cost so far to consumers of $360 million. Ontario supporting Enbridge's controversial Line 5 despite Indigenous opposition. Ontario providing Enbridge free right-of-way use of municipal land to install its pipelines. Senior staff in the Energy Ministry now, who not so long ago worked for Enbridge, and now Bill 165. In Bill 165, the government was too quick to protect Enbridge's financial interests and far too reluctant to protect Ontario families. Enbridge is a monopoly, and the only protection against its excesses is a regulator whose job is to protect consumers. Bill 165 effectively ends that independent regulator role. The haste, the overreach, the pandering to Enbridge that Bill 165 represents is clearly not in the public interest. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Hi there, I'm Gabby from the Clean Air Partnership. While Bill 165 has been named keeping energy costs down, it really should be called Keeping Ontario on the Fossil Fuel Pathway. And I hope to be able to explain to you why keeping Ontario on that fossil fuel pathway may be in the best interests of Enbridge, but it is most definitely not in the best interests of Ontarians. Based on past experience with infrastructure management, Ontario advanced the Development Charges Act. The Act ensures that municipalities have a mechanism to pay for infrastructure such as storm sewers, roads, and water pipes for new developments, and that property tax base doesn't have to subsidize those costs associated with new development. But no, that doesn't exist for fossil fuel infrastructure. Instead, that is subsidized off the rate base, which pays for all the upfront capital costs associated with bringing that fossil fuel infrastructure to new developments. Now think about that. Developers pay for electricity infrastructure, but not for fossil fuel infrastructure. Imagine as a developer not having to pay for any fossil fuel infrastructure. Honestly, wouldn't this make you lean towards using fossil fuels for energy? Why look elsewhere when the easy choice is handed to you free? Just because it's free doesn't mean that it's the best option. It is just the easiest one. This is another example of how there is a very unequal playing field that gives the fossil fuel option a real leg up in decision making. The OEB decision says to Enbridge, hey, look, it takes over 40 years to pay for fossil fuel pipelines, and we aren't supposed to be burning fossil fuels to heat our buildings for 40 more years. Therefore, you need to start taking the risk of stranded assets into your decision making. This Bill 165 says to Enbridge that you don't need to take that risk of stranded assets into your decision making. And if everyone associated and involved in infrastructure decisions should be considering the risk of stranded assets, why not Enbridge? Bill 165 will instead keep us on the pathway to keep burning fossil fuels. There are cost-effective options for meeting people's energy needs without relying on fossil fuels. But would those options be considered when the fossil fuel pathway costs nothing for developers? If now is not the time to address this preferential treatment Ontario's fossil fuel monopoly receives with regards to the rate-based subsidy for pipelines, when is? The government may have Enbridge's back, but who has the rate base's back? And who has the climate's back? How much longer are we going to bunt these decisions onto the next generation, or onto the next government, or even the next generation? Because the real price of many of these recent energy decisions taken by the Ontario government, be it a doubling down on gas for electricity generation or the natural gas expansion program, will be paid for by Ontarians presently in elementary school. Protecting Ontario's fossil fuel monopoly by subsidizing fossil fuel companies is not good for the future of Ontarians. I know Ontario can and must do better at energy planning. This OEB decision is an important step in that direction, and Bill 165, Keeping Ontario on the Fossil Fuel Pathway, reverses this crucial decision. Let's do better. Let's make decisions that benefit Ontarians and not just Enbridge's profit margins. I'll turn it over to Tim.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Grant. I chair the Net Zero Neighborhoods project of the Harvard Village Residents Association, and we work with 43 communities across the city of Toronto to help communities reduce their carbon footprint. The angle that I wanted to bring to this press conference is a little different, and simply to say that this bill is wrong for homeowners. It's wrong in so many ways that have already been mentioned. But natural gas is now more expensive to heating a home than a heat pump. An induction stove replacing a natural gas stove heats water faster, but it also doesn't leave unburnt hydrocarbons at sometimes toxic levels in our kitchens. Ditto, an air source heat pump water heater, way more efficient than natural gas water heaters. So here we have a piece of legislation that ignores the reality on the ground. And part of the reality on the ground is we still in this province have millions and millions of poorly insulated homes. And rather than address that issue and help homeowners use less energy, we have a bill that isn't taking us in the wrong direction. Thank you.
My name is Lana Goldberg with Stand.Earth, an environmental advocacy organization. The world is facing a crisis point, and scientists are telling us we cannot build any more fossil fuel infrastructure. Political leaders across Canada and the world understand this. More than 100 cities and subnational governments and 13 nation-states have endorsed the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is a commitment to stop fossil fuel production and infrastructure and to fairly phase out fossil fuels. Governments the world over are also taking concrete actions in this direction, including on buildings, which has been a high polluting sector. Just next door in the U.S., 2 states and more than 100 municipalities have passed building decarbonization policies. Here in Canada, the BC provincial government has made it easy for municipalities to adopt requirements for all new homes to be heated with non-emitting sources. Almost 30 municipalities have decided to adopt this level of the STEP code in the last year. Several months ago, the Quebec government introduced new regulations that set the stage for building decarbonization. 4 Quebec municipalities had already passed bylaws requiring new buildings use non-fossil fuel heating just a few weeks ago. New fossil fuel heating. And just a few weeks ago, Montreal Metropolitan Community, which includes 82 municipalities, passed regulations that require new small buildings to use non-emitting heating. But Ontario is going in the complete opposite direction. Instead of paving the way for a transition to clean energy, this government is actively propping up the gas industry, prioritizing its expansion and profit-making over the public interest. At a time when people are struggling to pay bills, it is irresponsible for the government to make us cough up more money to subsidize a mega corporation to make it even richer. It is also unfair to force gas down the throats of new homeowners when they could be paying less for electric heating and cooling. While the majority of the country and the world are figuring out ways to responsibly phase out fossil gas, this government is acting as the arm of Enbridge and bending political decision-making to serve its corporate interests. Given this government's propensity to serve special interests, it is important for Ontario's Auditor General to investigate the impacts of Bill 165 and expose its true nature as a bill that will increase monthly energy bills as well as Ontario's emissions. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our speakers, and thank you again for being here today to learn more about these things. I want to add that I'm so impressed with the Harbour Village Residents Association and another group called The Pocket in Toronto who show the way forward, and we should be supporting those initiatives rather than tipping the scales towards Enbridge. And we've heard about international examples of leadership, and it's time for Ontario to take leadership. And you just heard about our letter that's been released today. We sent it to the Auditor General with signatures from 30 groups, member groups. There's a link in our materials. And we've also brought in hundreds of petition signatures that have been read in the House. And we have an online petition of more than 5,000 people that we have delivered to Premier Ford and Energy Minister Todd Smith. This is a bill that we have a right to be angry about and to demand change. It is our hope that the AG will investigate the implications of the implementation of this bill. It is our wish that it be withdrawn. So we thank the members of the 30 groups who have signed the letter to the AG, some of whom are here today with us. And we recognize the concerns that are being raised by MPPs about Bill 165 and want to thank Peter Tabbins of the NDP and Mike Schreiner of the Greens for being here with us and also bringing these concerns to the Auditor General. And after the press conference, we're delivering a hard copy of the letter to the Auditor General's office. So I'll now take questions.
So this bill has been around since late last year. The government was very clear that they were going to do this. And in the past several months, there really hasn't been a lot of public reaction to this bill. It seems like there could have been a way to get people riled up about how they're being asked to subsidize houses, or that they're being denied a cut to their natural gas bills. But we haven't seen a lot of public engagement on this issue, and I'm wondering, why do you think that is? Do people just not care?
Well, I just think it takes a little while to get people aware of what's being done at the provincial level, and all our groups are undertaking those steps to make sure people do understand what is being done so that they can take action and contact their MPPs and insist on change. So we are doing that kind of activism. Would someone like to add?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll just add that 10 municipalities have passed motions in support of the OEB and in opposition to this bill. And as well, there have been letters to the editor that have been published by residents from various areas in Ontario. And also, thousands of people have written to their MPPs and to the energy minister and to the premier. So altogether, tens of thousands of emails have been sent. So people are engaged and people are concerned. And we're, perhaps it's not getting the media coverage that it ought to be, but it is a scandal that we should be covering more.
Anyone? That's good. Okay, thank you for the question, and thank you for the answer, Lana. And Environmental Defence is one of our signatories, and they are also engaging the public in knowing about what's happening with this and responding to it.
We saw the debate yesterday on this bill, and the government doesn't seem to be too inclined to defend the bill. They're not downplaying the fact that they're keeping a subsidy for houses in place. When it's brought up in the debate yesterday, it was so you're not in favor of lowering housing prices. They clearly think that this is a winning message, and so far this issue has not gained a lot of steam in 4 or 5 months. So, and the bill is on third reading now. So it's our guys are coming down to the wire. What can be done in the next several weeks to make the government start feeling the pain on this issue?
Okay, thank you.
The government was very confident on the Green Belt as well. The government is confident on its initiatives. It doesn't mean that there is not growing opposition to the initiatives. And the bill is going to be passed. We're in a situation of a majority government, and that's why we're hoping that the Auditor General can use her office to actually investigate, because there are real issues here. There are cost issues about what it's going to mean for consumers having to pay for Enbridge's gas infrastructure. There's issues about the costs associated down the road with stranded assets. Those are value for money propositions that the Auditor General can look at. There are also real environmental consequences. The Auditor General's office in the past has looked at Ontario government's climate plan, if you call it a plan, and was very critical of it. This is another initiative that is going to set Ontario back and make it impossible for us to reach our 2030 targets. So, yes, the legislature is in a majority situation, and the bill will pass. That we are hoping that public opposition will continue to build, and that the Auditor General will take a look at this and have some objective eyes on it that says, wait a minute, there's some things going on here that shouldn't be going on.
I know did someone else want to speak on that?
Well, just one more thing to note is that there were hearings of the Interior on this bill, and a bunch of organizations and environmental groups presented there. Of course, this is a very, niche kind of policy area that is hard to engage with, but many organizations presented at these hearings expressed their discontent, including a lot of the groups here, Stand.Earth, Clean Air Partnership, and others like Environmental Defense. So there has been, behind the scenes voice raising and concerns that are just not getting through to the media.
So I think it's probably a safe assumption that the bill is going to pass, and the 40-year amortization period is going to be reinstated. But they are going to have another hearing in the summer on this, and hypothetically there could be a different amortization period that comes out of that. It could be 30 years, could be 20, could be 15, could be anything like that. Would you guys be okay? Is it no amortization period or bust, essentially?
I think one of the important things about this is drawing attention to the favored system that the fossil fuel system achieves within Ontario's kind of considerations. Really what it comes down to is having an open playing field and creating, at least at a minimum, an equal playing field between low carbon options and the fossil fuel option. So you really need to developers need to be highlighting the infrastructure cost associated with it so they can bring that into their decision making and identify how much it is relating to, let's say, for a low rise development, how much would it cost to heat it with an all-electric, reducing all of that need for that infrastructure? How much would a cold climate air source heat pump in comparison to a fossil fuel furnace as well as an air conditioner? How do those two costs compare with each other, both in upfront capital cost as well as long-term operational costs for the property owner over time? That kind of analysis needs to take place in order to enable a level playing field between lower carbon energy systems and the fossil fuel energy system. So if it means that it's, let's say, for example, we might have issues with regards to the supply chain for air source heat pumps in the low-rise market. If that's the case, maybe we should be really going for a 5-year amortization kind of a situation where you just meet it so that you can help building and support the supply chain to enable the low carbon solution to be an easy option for developers to tap into. I would say that's one of the key options. This is one of the challenges with this conversation because the energy system isn't easy. It is very, very complicated. And the easy solution is what is being selected right now. Let's keep on with the fossil fuel option. Same old, same old. Why? Because it's an easy solution to a very complicated problem. Ontario's energy system, we need to have this conversation on how do we transition away from fossil fuels, because if we don't, and we do continue to build all this infrastructure, it's $1.5 billion this is going to cost the rate base in the next 5 years. That takes 45 years to pay for, 45, 50 years sometimes to pay for. That means that in 2065, we would be burning fossil fuels to heat homes. That is not possible. So we have to figure out a way to phase it out. Is it 1 year? Is it 0? Is it 1? Is it 5? But it's certainly not 40, and I don't even believe that it's 20, because by 2030, even with the Model National Building Code, we should be phasing out fossil fuel use for building heating in new developments. We've got to stop that hemorrhaging we're getting with regards to bringing fossil fuels into new developments so that you can really focus on the big picture one of existing buildings and how are we going to decarbonize our existing buildings. But it has to be an effort across all levels of government and all parties to really dig into Ontario's energy system and help Ontario ensure that we're doing a smooth transition towards decarbonization. And Bill 165, it just keeps us on the fossil fuel pathline, and who knows for how long, but we have to have an adult conversation on how we transition Ontario's energy system towards decarbonization.
The world's scientists are telling us that we should be building no more fossil fuel infrastructure. That is the purpose of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Toronto and other 12 municipalities across Canada have signed on. Globally, it's 100 cities, it's many countries are making the commitment. We have a target. It's a weak one, okay, but we do have a target of 30% reduction in emissions by 2030. We never hear about that target, and the agencies are not given that consideration. They're asked to look at reliability and affordability, but it's a limited lens that they're looking at it. And in this case, they made the right decision. We support the Ontario Energy Board's decision, and then they've had that overturned, or they're about to have it overturned. So we, as Gabby says, we can't be using gas in 2065. The whole world is changing. We need to stop now, and we need to have the adult conversation. We need to move forward.
This is slightly off topic, but since you guys are all here, the government announced this morning that they have procured 1,784 megawatts of clean energy storage, which is like battery storage that helps sort of smooth out distribution from new renewable energy projects. And then they've also procured 411 megawatts of natural gas generating capacity. And so they're doing a lot more with the in the battery storage than on the natural gas. Is that a good sign, or what do you make of this procurement?
Well, that one announcement has to be considered in the face of other announcements. They're doing way more on natural gas production than they are on battery storage, probably 3 times as much. And the issue of battery storage is, what is it storing? Is it electricity from gas-fired plants that are getting stored in the batteries, or is it energy from windmills and solar arrays? So I think it is great that after 5 years of refusing to even consider renewable power, that the Ontario government is now considering procuring through the IESO, procuring more renewable power. That is a step in the right direction. It is completely overshadowed by Ontario's commitment to building more methane-fired electricity plants.
Yes, and I'd just like to add that in California, they are just going day after day after day, month after month, they are using renewables to power their grid, renewables combined with storage. So we need to see that happening in Ontario, and many of the groups that you see here today have signed on to the pledge that came from COP28 to triple renewables by 2030. Or 2035. We give them a little bit longer, but let's get moving with the renewables. We need to see that happening.
Where are you guys at on nuclear and the nuclear expansion?
Yes,
That's it.
This is where it gets really complicated on one. One of the key things that I think is really the biggest risk we face in Ontario is that we know nuclear prices are always going up in that direction. Now, we recognize that renewables compete against nuclear hands down from an economic perspective in terms of generation. Where renewables have the additional cost burden is on the storage associated with those renewables. That's the challenge that we're facing. But we also know that nuclear is just going up, and there's no nuclear plant that I can think of that has ever come out on time and on budget. It's only just ramping up in terms of expenses. We also know that the recycling and storage prices are going down. So if we don't have our kind of ability to kind of not throw all our eggs into the nuclear basket, we are going to miss out on a lower cost electricity source, because we know that renewables are way cheaper than nuclear. And then even if you bring in the needed storage associated with it, then you're really looking at the prices going down for storage and going down fast. When is the right time for Ontario to switch and really putting its emphasis on renewables and storage? And all I can say is that makes a lot more financial sense than investing in nuclear does at this point in time, considering just the cost perspective. Thanks.
We're still paying for the last generation of nuclear decisions. It's built into our tax system. It's still hundreds and millions of dollars on the accounts. The next generation of nuclear is going to be equally as expensive. And there is no guarantee that it's going to work. That the Ontario government committed to 4 small modular reactors at Darlington. Small modular reactors don't exist. Anywhere that they've come close to production, they have failed. The principles behind them have pulled back. The last one was in Utah. We're talking about 4 in Darlington. Small modular reactors are called PowerPoint reactors for a reason, because they only exist on paper. To commit Ontario to untested, untried, expensive, unsafe technologies when we know what we have in renewable energy that's reliable and safe and cheap, why can't we make the appropriate decision?
Okay. More questions?
We gotta get to a question period.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And, we really appreciate the opportunity. I want to thank again Peter Tabbins for booking the space for us, and for Mike and Peter being here, and for your commitment to getting this report done by the Auditor General and fighting this bill and making sure that Ontarians have actually the right information, the correct information on this, so we can move forward together to a better future. Thank you.
Yeah.